Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. I'm happy that people turned out even though it's snowing. People in Washington kind of freak out with snow. And let me thank Victoria Harker. Let me just tell you a little about Victoria. She's a Kogod grad. She's on the Kogod advisory board. She has had a very, very successful career. She's been CFO of 3 publicly traded companies, most recently Tegna, which was part of Gannett when they spun off all of their media assets. And then she also was on the board of directors for the University of Virginia for many years. And she's quite a prominent person in the business world. And I want to just foot stomp a little on something she talked about, networks, okay, for all the students. So I knew of Victoria because she worked for my former boss, Bill Conway, who was one of the founders of the Carlyle Group. And that was at MCI, I think, right? And when I met with her first when I became dean, I said, we are going to be the #1 school in the country in sustainability. And she said, oh, well, you need to meet this company. You need to meet Xylem. And I said, Xylem? I've never heard of Xylem. She said, look it up, learn about it, and I'll introduce you. Xylem is actually a company that is at the perfect intersection of everything we're trying to do at Kogod, because they are one of the most innovative, dynamic companies at the nexus of sustainability, AI, and analytics. And that's what we're going to get into today with Matthew. But the point is that you never know how someone you know is going to be able to expand your network and help whatever you're doing and help you achieve your goals. So thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
Let me start with your background. So you grew up all over the country, but in Alabama.
Grew up in Alabama.
Yeah. And then you played football for a small school named?
The University of Alabama.
Okay. And I looked up a couple clips of you, actually, and you played tight end, you kicked, but then you also were center for long snaps.
Yeah.
And I saw one video of you like snapping the ball to the punter and then going down and catching it on the 1-yard line in a big SEC game.
Yeah.
So when you were catching that ball, did you think, oh, one day I'm going to be a CEO?
No. I blacked out.
Okay.
You know, that's one thing about sports. You get so focused. You know, you got to let the preparation take over. So all the work you do ahead of the game, you've heard the phrase, the game's won before the game's played. You just got to get out there and not think. And I think that's really helped me in business, actually, compartmentalize. Because in roles like this or, you know, in leadership roles, you get a lot thrown at you. And so being able to be focused, compartmentalize is really important to being effective.
And when you were playing, did you have someone like Taylor Swift cheering for you?
No.
Okay.
No, but we had some, as everybody probably knows, some pretty crazy rabid fans in Alabama.
Yes,
so
I've heard.
You know, seriously, I mean, it was very stressful because mentally, because if you made a mistake, I mean, you were in the microscope. I mean, I know kids that couldn't even go home, like after making mistakes in a game, and so there's a lot of pressure. And that, I think that really at an early age, you know, I went to college when I was 17 years old. I don't do this much anymore, but I got redshirted. So it means you get to practice and get beat up, but you don't get to play in a game for your first year. But then I went on to play 4 years. But that pressure is intense, and I think that really helps get you ready for life, to be honest.
One of the things we focus on here at Kogod at American University is experiential learning, basically learning outside the classroom. So did you learn more inside or outside the classroom about business when you were in Alabama?
Both, I would say equally. I mean, because it's become a major business now with NIL and, you know, name, image, and likeness within college sports. But it's a big business. And so I knew I was in a business when I was working 40 hours a week, watching film, practicing, and getting ready for games. It was generating millions of dollars. So I understood the impact. But equally, I was there to go to school. And a lot of my teammates, if you will, were also there to go to school. The thing that I'm impressed with the university today, and I can't remember what it was when I was there, but when Nick Saban was coach there, he had over a 90% graduation rate. That's not really talked about. That's in like the top 5 in the country. So I think at Alabama, my experience was you got a great education, but you also got a really great education on how to grow up, and sports was a great avenue to do that.
And then after you worked a little and you pursued an MBA, why did you pursue an MBA?
I think one of the things I'll talk about that's important, I think you've got to be a lifelong learner. There's kind of three things I say, and you could get 500 people up in there, have a different point of view, so don't take what I'm saying as like the gospel, but being a lifelong learner, I think, is one of the traits and attributes that you need in leadership roles. Things are changing all the time, and you got to stay up on things. Number two, I would say experiences matter. And, we're all in this room, going to college. Some of you are in graduate school. We've got a good base of intelligence, but it's really about getting different experiences that is super important. I'd say the third thing is, focusing on what I would call emotional intelligence and being able to engage people, be a team player, be able to work in a team environment, because that is really critical to success in being a leader. So those are, three things I'd mention up front.
That's great. So tell us about Xylem. I mean, it's headquartered in DC.
Yeah.
You have 21,000 employees and $8 billion in revenue, publicly traded. It's a huge, significant company.
Right.
But since it's business to business, it's not a consumer-oriented company. But tell us what you do.
Yeah, so let me maybe take a step back. Xylem was formed in 2011, so it's a fairly new company. We just had our 12th anniversary. It was spun out of ITT, which was a large conglomerate back in 2011. It spun off as I would call it a pump company, more or less. We did some municipal treatment of water, but largely a pump company back. It was $3.5 billion in revenue. So, Patrick Decker, the former CEO, along with the board, Victoria was on the board at the time, they did something called value mapping. And they said, hey, what are the opportunity sets out there for us to go attack in terms of being a leader in water? And there were lots of different ones. Getting into emerging markets, helping those markets that are growing at 2x developed markets, getting into digital. Digital is a big word. You can use digital across the entire value chain, but really more important in terms of our products and executing against products. And then lastly, getting focused on industrial water, because as everybody knows, scarcity is a real issue around water, and industrial water and services was a big part of that platform. We just did our largest acquisition in this last space last year. It was a $7 billion acquisition. So kind of rounding out a decade of building the business to now $8 billion and having this incredible platform to solve water. And the thing I'd leave you with is we're in a very unique position. We're the world leader in water, but we can see across the whole water value chain in everything we do. We built an incredible portfolio. So from pumping clean water, taking it out of a reservoir, pumping that to a treatment facility, treating that water, taking that out to buildings and residential locations, metering that water, treating water along the way, doing analytical instrumentation of water about in the environment or in the four walls of a treatment facility. So across the water value chain, it gives us a competitive advantage over our competition because we can go into a customer and think holistically about solutions we provide versus just a specific product in the process.
So water is one of the biggest challenges in the world. I saw a stat that says, actually in your sustainability report, that said 30% of people on the planet do not have access to clean water.
Right.
And by 2050, it's going to go to 50%,
right.
40%. So your company in technology is helping to reverse that. And so A, is that a reversible trend? And B, how is your company actually helping to solve the water problem?
Yeah, it is a reversible trend. Maybe I'd point to a couple of areas. Maybe we'll go back to this recent acquisition we did with a company called Evoqua. They do a lot of industrial treatment and of water. And a lot of processes in water, for example, in microelectronics, making a computer chip, it takes 1,500 gallons of water to make a chip. That's super water intensive in areas where we have a lot of scarcity today. So going in and helping those customers reuse that water, that water that's used in the process becomes wastewater. We take that, we treat it, and we make it processed water again. So you're basically water neutral. That's one way of doing it.
Got it.
Another way that we do it would be focusing on what we call it non-revenue water, but in essence, it's water leakage. And around the world, if you look at it, there's places that are really good at it, like the UAE, where I was just in Dubai. They're really good because they have no water. And so their leakage rate is around 6%, of the water they produce gets leaked out into the environment. In the US, it's probably in the 30s, and in some places it can be in the 60s. And so we focus quite a bit, and we'll probably talk on artificial intelligence in a moment, but we focus quite a bit on making sure we can help our customers understand where the leaks are happening, number one, but more importantly, how to deploy capital against where leaks are going to happen. So really deploying capital in a very strategic and smart way.
Let's just jump to the question that I was going to ask you later, but artificial intelligence, how are you using AI and analytics to actually help your customers find and then fix those leaks? Because water systems have millions, hundreds of millions of miles of pipes and systems, and what are you doing? How is technology enabling you and your clients to do better?
So one piece of our business, it's called assessment services, and we go out and we put a device in a pipe. It's typically for clean water, and we do acoustical listening in that pipe, and we can realize where the leak is happening. And so we can pinpoint it down to about a foot, and we can tell people where to dig to fix.
I got it. And
so we do that, and we get all this data, this acoustical data, and right now, a lot of our people have to go through that. And the bottleneck we have is it takes about 6 weeks to go through data when you do a job. And so we're using AI technology to take the people out, redeploy them for other things, so we can do that analysis in about a week. It used to take 6 weeks. So we're using AI to remove bottlenecks and get the data to our customers more quickly, getting that acoustical data.
So AI is essentially creating a 600% productivity.
Exactly.
Increase.
So productivity in that case. The other way, has everybody heard of a digital twin? So in essence, a digital twin is like a virtual model of a physical object, if you will. So if you take the infrastructure around the building, you can digitize it through sensors, and you can create a digital twin. And so helping customers create basically a replica of their infrastructure through sensor data, we can basically manage it through a computer. And we can break up, for example, DC into different districts, Washington, DC, and we can analyze the water flow, and we can see generally where things are not going well. So you couple that with another thing that we do is water meters. So at a commercial building or your residential home, we meter the water that's coming into the building. Through our technology, we can see leaks down to a very, very small leak amount. So you couple the kind of at-use data with this broader data, and we can really help customers solve non-revenue water, and we can pinpoint and tell them where the leaks are to go fix. Wow. For example, in the city of Valencia, where we have a joint venture partner, we saved around 4 million cubic meters of water in a year in the city of Valencia, Spain, just by using digital twin technology coupled with this meter data. So that's how we're using AI to help solve this big problem around water scarcity.
And is your fastest growing area for business in developing countries? Because that's where the need for water technology is.
Yeah, for sure. Xylem is roughly 60% in the US or the Americas and 40% kind of rest of world. Of our business, about 15% comes from what I would call developing markets, and they grow at kind of 2x the developed markets. And so that's an area that we're focused. I just started the year in India and Dubai with our teams there on the ground, and each one of those countries has very different problems. India, around 90% of wastewater goes into a river or stream. That's a real health issue. 90%
untreated.
Of untreated wastewater goes out. It's not treated. So 90% of wastewater is not treated in India, and it goes out into river, lakes, and streams. And then that becomes drinking water for folks, which creates a lot of health issues. And Claudia and I actually had an opportunity to go out in the outskirts of Bangalore in a rural community and build a small-scale water system that delivers about 1,000 liters a minute to a school of 500 kids who can't get educated, because they're sick all the time. There's E. coli in the water, there's bacteria and things like that. So, having a tremendous impact on that community while we were there is important. But if you go to India, they're doing, they have a project called Tap for Every Home. They're linking rivers together for clean drinking water. And they're also building large-scale treatment facilities now for the first time in their country's history. We've just been awarded some of those in Mumbai, and so they're kind of state-of-the-art wastewater treatment.
So over the next, say, 10 years, if you're developing country business, which is 15% is growing 2x, do you see that getting to be 30, 40% of your business?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to grow in developed markets because there is a lot of subsidy in the developed markets. We have aging infrastructure that needs to be addressed. We have, forever chemicals in our water that need to be treated. But yeah, I would say that it's definitely going to be more than 15, probably more around 20, 25% of our revenue going forward.
You're a highly technology-oriented and innovative company. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to criticize your clients, but people don't think of water utilities or infrastructure companies as the most dynamic,
right,
innovative. So how do you balance you being fast-growing, innovative, and dynamic with the fact that you're working with slower, I guess, incumbent players that maybe don't move as fast?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's kind of like, timing's everything. And I think we're at the right time with our customers, utility customers. I would say our industrial customers are much more progressive, which we can talk about in a moment. That's probably more so on the utility side, where that's the case, where utilities are slow. And quite frankly, I like them to be a little bit slow because they're the only utility that puts things in my body.
Right.
And they're risk averse because they have to deliver clean water to us. And they want to make sure they're not working with some startup, that doesn't really have a track record, and they go implement their technology, and all of a sudden they have a major issue. So I get the fact that they want to be prudent because of what they do. I would say since the pandemic, they have gotten, water utilities have gotten much more progressive around technology and moving more quickly, partly because there's a big problem on employment. You have a lot of folks that are retiring. A third of the workforce in utilities will retire in the next 5 to 7 years. And so that's a big issue. They need to automate their processes. There's a lot of regulation coming their way in terms of, and they're making net zero pledges around being sustainable in their energy consumption. And so they have to automate. They need to use technology to help get there. And we talked about, forever chemicals in water. They have to make big investments in water. So with regulation. So there's a lot coming at them. And so they realize very quickly, we have to have digital technology to be able to tackle these problems. On the industrial side, these are businesses. These are people like Intel. These are people like Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, large companies that you all know that use a lot of water in their processes. And they say, hey, look, we get it. We're at 2/3 of companies around the world, water's a risk in their enterprise risk matrix, right, that they've got to deal with. And so
for an Intel, they use water for cooling and for what do you do for a company like Intel?
They have processed water for the chip process. It's very water intensive in terms
which has
of
to be like
chips.
pure
clean water. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your systems create that highly
ultra pure water for processed water. We also take the waste from that, we retreat it and reuse it so they're water neutral.
Got it.
So they're not so water dependent. So that's an area that I would say the technology is much more, they're more progressive in terms of adoption of technology.
Right. A couple of other clients you have which are neat in my view. One is surf parks, which I've never done, but I always wanted to go. So you have these like really fast pumps that create the waves?
Yeah.
And have you ever surfed?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I love the boogie board. I don't get up on the surfboard. I'm getting too old. But
okay.
I like the boogie board. There's a place in Florida, actually, where I used to take my daughter where we did it. Yeah.
At a surf park?
At a surf park.
And did the wave ever fail when you were surfing?
No. Of course not.
Okay.
No, we never fail. No, not while I was there. But we actually do a lot of work with Disney. Actually, Claudia has this phrase, water is heavy. Water is heavy. We move a lot of water around Disney with our pumps.
So like in A Small World and...
Yeah, like one of these Terror Lagoon things.
Right, okay.
You would be on a park ride.
And then you also have, this is kind of somber, but it's one of the most beautiful places, is at the 9/11 Memorial, where there's this giant hole in the ground, which I guess signifies the hole that event created. And that's 8 stories, and your pumps...
Yeah, we have our pumps kind of buried underneath the memorial that move the water through that whole process. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about sustainability and what that means to Xylem. So how does sustainability, what does that mean to you, and how is it integrated into what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of at the center of sustainability being a water company. So, it's kind of everything we do. A lot of companies that I've worked for, this is the 5th multinational company I've worked for in my career, sustainability is a thing, right? and nothing against those companies, they're great companies, but it's kind of a thing on the side. The reason I came to Xylem, that it attracted me to Xylem, and I think it's a reason why our colleagues are attracted and why we retain them, is because sustainability is woven through everything we do. And I think a proof point of that is we have a program called Watermark, which is a volunteer program. We had 90% of the legacy Xylem business, kind of prior acquisition of Evoqua, which would have been roughly 17,000, 18,000 colleagues. 90% volunteered last year in some kind of a water activity around the world. And that includes what we call wired and unwired colleagues, people that are on the factory floor, that are building products, are out doing good in the community. So sustainability kind of runs through everything we do. Obviously, our products are focused on resiliency of businesses, affordability of water, tackling scarcity of water. So it runs through everything we do. I'm humbled to be leading a company that does these things. So it's incredible.
Another thing about sustainability, well, one of your jobs as CEO is to generate attractive returns for your shareholders,
right,
and also to increase the share price. That's what Victoria did for her whole career. So you can do that through multiple ways. You can get existing shareholders to buy more,
right,
or you can broaden your shareholder base. So we were talking to Professor Julie Anderson, who used to run $50 billion of ESG funds at BlackRock. And she said, we were overweight in all our funds in Xylem. So does the sustainability focus help you expand your the shareholder base? Or there's also kind of a backlash right now against sustainability. Is that reducing your shareholder base?
I think over the years it's definitely helped. We're not in it for that in terms of expanding our base or thinking about it that way. We just think about it's the right thing to do for business. And if it's the right thing to do for business, then the chips are going to fall where they may. And it's also the right thing for our colleagues. We talk about this all the time. It attracts talent. It retains talent. And it's really not, I wouldn't say we don't get up every day with the agenda that we've got to go attract new investors, because we're more of a ESG-centric focused company. It's really what we do and how we wake up every day. Now, it's benefited us because of the things that we do. We were able to expand our investor base. We have a large European investor base, which I think geographically is different than some kind of broader industrials. So for sure it's helped. But we get up every morning thinking about how do we serve customers in the most sustainable way we can. And the benefit is we do probably have an overweight to investors that care about that stuff, because they understand companies that behave that way typically perform better than others that don't.
Right. So just for the audience, when I was at Carlyle, our experience was that investors that cared about sustainability tended to be on the West Coast and the East Coast and in Europe. And other places you might not get questions about sustainability, but if you go to Northern Europe, it's going to be on every investor's.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Claudia can tell you, she's just done a round of, and Dorothy, on governance and sustainability with our investor base. We do it every winter. And so especially the European investors, they go very deep. And the questions you get from different groups are different.
We have a lot of students here that are interested in sustainable finance. So you issued $1 billion green bond, okay, which is pretty large, and that's a new area. What was required to call it a green bond? Why did you do it, and how did it help your capital structure?
Yeah. So why is it green? It was because the proceeds, the money we received from the bond, was going to be used on sustainable projects. Which is pretty much everything we do. It's around affordability of water, quality of water, resiliency of infrastructure, things like that. So most of what we do would qualify. So that kind of made it in some ways green, right? Also, the interest rate was tied to a third-party company called Sustainalytics, that we had to meet certain metrics in their scorecard, and if we didn't, then our interest rate would go up.
Got it. Okay.
So we did.
So it's actually
So it had a variable
monitoring your activity.
Exactly.
And then if you don't hit the milestones, your interest rate goes up.
Correct.
Wow.
So there were certain measurements there for the rate.
So that's a strong incentive for you to keep making progress. Okay.
Yeah, so that was big. And we did it, this was in 2020. Partly was done to retire older debt. But also during the pandemic, we took the opportunity to become a little bit more, drive more liquidity. because we didn't know what was going on during COVID,
Right.
and what cash we may need.
Right.
And so that was part of it as well.
I want to ask you a few more kind of personal questions, and then we're going to open it up.
Okay,
So
perfect.
let's start with, you just mentioned the word COVID. So actually, I have a senior in college. How many of the students here are seniors in college? Okay, so they kind of got the worst of COVID. They missed their senior year of high school, their proms, their graduation. Then they started college remotely. My daughter came home, which like coming home was probably the last thing a freshman in college wants to do, which she still reminds me. But you started at Xylem, not as CEO, but running one of the divisions, I think 4 days before the world shut down.
Yeah.
So how was that a challenge? That must have been a huge challenge because you're new, you're trying to meet people, trying to make an impression. Like, how was that a challenging period, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so my daughter graduated high school in 2020 as well.
Okay.
So she's a COVID student as well, is a senior in university now. I go back to the, remember the 3 attributes I talked about earlier that I think at least have helped me be successful? I leaned on those. And had that been the first segment I had run in a public company from my house, I would have been in trouble. Luckily, I had done that. But more importantly, I architected my career to get multiple experiences along the way. I've been in project management, sales management, marketing. I've run a digital team. I've had portions of engineering report to me. Run product management for 3 different companies. Product management's great, by the way, because you touch everything in a company. That's where all bad things go to die. I mean, whenever there's a problem, product management gets it. Right. And you wake up in the morning with your hair on fire about a portfolio, which is how you generate cash flows, right? And it's the lifeblood of the company, and how do you generate margin? So I go back to experiences. Had I not had all these experiences, March 16th, I would have been in trouble. Right. And because I had those experiences I could lean on, I could do it for 15 months, more or less, from my house. And so that really helped me quite a bit. I think also, being a people person, it really actually afforded me, we didn't, probably appreciate Zoom at the time, but Zoom really helped me be able to go very wide and deep in the organization and get to meet people. Otherwise, I would have been on an airplane for a year, going to all these facilities, had a lot of dead time, and I wouldn't have been able to meet the people I met. Got it. And so that was important. And, again, being a lifelong learner, it gave me some opportunity to learn the business. I was, reading at night about Xylem and learning the company. So I looked at it from a positive point of view, that it afforded me those things.
What about working in teams? We do a lot of work at having our students work in teams. And when you work on a team project as a student, you learn there's going to be some student that is eager and does everything.
My daughter talk about this.
Some student that doesn't do anything.
Yes.
Some that are difficult. And these learnings apply throughout your whole career. So what is your advice for students on how to manage those dynamics in their schoolwork, but also how those dynamics are going to play forward for 30, 40 years of your career?
I mean, what you're describing is life. It doesn't end when you graduate at 22 or your master's at 24, or you're whatever age you are. And so those are great, what you're getting today are great lessons.
All the students you've experienced.
Yeah, everybody, I've experienced it. I know my daughter calls me up and says, Dad,
this guy's lame.
I'm the responsible one. I'm doing all the work, and
right.
I got too much going on. I got a job, and so I hear this. But that's life, and that happens in life. It happens in sports. It happens on teams, right? And that's why, for me, sports was so great, because you have to be selfless, and it's about the team, and it's not about you.
Right.
And knowing, I think one of the most important things, in addition to what I told you earlier, knowing yourself is really important. If you know yourself, you can work better with a team. And it takes a while to kind of learn who you are. It took me into my kind of mid-30s, early 40s before I really understood who I was. Now, had I been a little bit more intentional up front, I might have gotten it earlier, but it does take that long. So knowing yourself is important. But at the end of the day, what I found is you need to be friendly and direct with people. You can be really nice, but you can also be firm and direct and set the right expectations with people. And I think feedback is a gift.
So if you're part of a team and not now you're CEO, so everybody presumably listens to you or most of the time.
No.
Okay. But when you were
a team that's called a board.
Okay. Yeah. But when you were coming up,
Yeah.
and you were working on a team project, and someone was not carrying their weight, who was your peer?
Right.
How did you manage that?
You have to be. I had to get this skill. This is.
That's the hardest skill is dealing with peers.
If I look back at my 18, 25-year-old self, being up here talking would be like stressful. So you evolve and you get. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, and you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to grow and to learn. And so I've tried to do that. And so you've got to put yourself in a situation like I was going. Feedback is a gift. And there's something I learned at the Center of Creative Leadership, Situation, Behavior, Impact, SBI. What's the situation? What's your behavior? What's the impact? And so addressing somebody that way versus, I heard you did this, or I saw you, get it to the facts. Here's the situation. Here's how you behaved, and here's the impact on the team. And this is a team sport. So just being honest with people, because it's what you're giving them as a gift. Whether they know it or not, they might not like it, they might not see it as a gift, but it is a gift. And ultimately, it's going to make you feel better that you did that. So that'd be my advice.
Okay, here's my last and most important question, and then we'll open it up. What should an American university student that wants to work for Xylem do to get hired by Xylem? What attributes should they show?
Graduate.
Graduate, okay.
No, attributes. I talked about some of these earlier. Claudia and I were chatting about this. I think being a lifelong learner, being super inquisitive is really important. Always questioning, challenge the status quo. Don't accept things how they are. Be that lifelong learner. Those are things I really value. I love what you're doing here with trying to be, you are becoming the sustainability leader at this school because it's woven through everything we do. So having a passion for the environment, for water, those things, if they resonate with us, then we're probably going to hire you. So not many people are focused like you are at this school of weaving sustainability into business, and that's a winning combination. And so I think you're getting a great education here, and that's all. That's going to serve you well as far as I'm concerned if I'm interviewing somebody from this school.
Okay, I have one other question, which is your life on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
So when I met you, I said, "Where do you live?" And you remember what you said?
Yeah, Florida. Oh, airplane.
On an airplane. Okay, so you're in an average month, how many days do you sleep outside your bed?
80%.
80%?
More or less, 75, 80.
Okay. And it's one different place every night? Okay.
Yeah. This is where sports comes in. Right. It's compartmentalizing, it's discipline and focus. Okay. And you've got to be highly organized. And back in October, November of last year, I had my calendar set for this year. That doesn't mean things don't change, but the things that are concrete or anchored, I know when they are. The first thing I do is I anchor things like board meetings, earnings calls, investor meetings, things that I have to go do.
You want to be at the headquarters to do your earnings calls, presumably.
Right, exactly. So there's things that I have to be somewhere to do something, right? So those get anchored first. The second thing I do, vacation. Before I do anything else, the stuff I have to do, and the second thing is vacation. And I carve out 3 weeks. Now, I'm not always on vacation when I'm on vacation, but more or less I am. I check in and do things, but that's important. You have to get the time off. You got to get the mental break. Otherwise, you just burn out. And so that's important. But that proactivity around your calendar, carving out that time for yourself matters. And also, carving your time out during the week matters as well. So that's really important.
Let's open it up to, yes, maybe introduce yourself, say what year you are.
This year with a bachelor's in international relations, focusing on environmental sustainability and conflict resolution. Thank you for coming. You are very inspiring, and we really appreciate you coming here today. My question is, do you approach emerging economies differently than more industrialized nations? Are local leaders involved in that process, or is it more based on data gathered from Xylem? Thank you.
I would say because of the growing nature of those markets being 2x our developed markets, we do put a lot of emphasis on that. We actually have an emerging markets team that's dedicated to emerging markets or developing countries. And everybody we don't have expatriates, so basically everybody in country is from that country. So in China, India, the Middle East, we don't try to concoct a strategy from headquarters in DC and parachute that in. The strategies are developed locally and then brought back to the segment leads that run the different 4 businesses within Xylem. So yes, a very local approach and very hands-on approach.
There are huge cultural differences. I mean,
Absolutely.
having you go into Bangalore, India, and say, this is how we do it in the United States.
Exactly. They're going to look at me like I've got 3 heads.
Well.
Yeah, exactly.
Good question. Next question. We also have, I think, 100 people watching online. We can take some online questions. Next question.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. My name is Atif. I am an MBA student from Kogod School of Business. Really interesting to see how much Xylem is investing in research. And you spoke about digital twins, which is such an advanced technology. We were working with IBM the other day, and then they spoke of it and then how advanced it is. And then just knowing that Xylem is working on this is so great. So my question was, how do you balance innovation with a strong financial performance at Xylem, given that you're investing in R&D and you're also have such great revenue? So how do you manage both of these?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you don't invest in innovation, you can't grow in the future. So you're funding the pipeline of the future. And that's why I was talking about product management earlier being such a pivotal role. It's getting that voice of customer and getting the alignment on what we need to do, which is the product team, on the how we need to do it with engineering. That alignment with the roadmaps is critical. And so we make sure we're investing 3.5–4% of our revenue in R&D because we're preparing for the future cash flows of the company. That's something I always pay a very close watch to make sure that our product vitality rate, which is a measure of new product revenue over a 5-year period, needs to be kind of in the 20s. 20% of our revenue should come from products that are new over a 5-year period. And that's how we look at it. That's one measure to look at. The other thing, going back to the question earlier around especially water utilities adopting technology, we have a Xylem Innovation Labs, which focuses on, we invest in startups through venture capital funds, but we also help startups through accelerating their journey with our expertise. And that introduction to utilities is a good way to introduce technology because they trust us. And if we can bring a startup with technology into the utility, then it makes that bridge much easier.
Good question. Yes, Ken, maybe just introduce yourself and what you do. You're a junior, right?
Yeah. Okay. Ken Biberai, AU alum, working commercial real estate. What I love about this series, Dean, is not only coming at it from a business perspective, but we're here in Washington. So we'd love your perspective on dealing with government. You mentioned subsidies overseas, right. Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure bill. How important is it for government to kind of understand the investment and magnitude that's needed to accomplish what you're trying to do? And what's your message to, policymakers, etc.?
Yeah, it's a simple word. It's called consistency. Most corporations, a lot of businesses get a bad rap. I would say that most corporations that I've been involved in, they want to do good. They want to focus on the sustainability journey. But we have to have consistent policies. We can't be whipsawed back and forth because we're deploying capital, and we have to have certainty. And so I would say that the message would be consistency and certainty matters for business. And I think you'll find that a lot of businesses are very collaborative and want to drive these agendas in terms of policies. In terms of infrastructure fund or bill and things of that nature, we work very closely with EPA to make sure we understand the bill appropriately, to make sure that we're meeting the content requirements. Because I don't know if many of you know, there are content requirements to qualify for federal funding for infrastructure projects. It has to be 55%.
Domestic content.
Domestic content. Right, okay. So it has to be 55% local content and built in the U.S. And so that's the requirement. So that requires a little shift in your supply chain, which I was getting back to consistency, to understand how to move your supply chain around to meet the requirements, which is becoming more and more challenging as corporations, with a lot of countries, focusing on more protectionist policies And that dynamic really stresses out your supply chain, which over the past 40 or 50 years has been built kind of in a global way.
Right. Professor Omar teaches supply chain. He's nodding.
So it's one of our, a big
It's a huge
area.
challenge.
Absolutely.
Right.
Supply chain is one of our biggest focus areas.
Next question. Yes.
Hi, I'm Nabila. I'm an analytics student at Kogod. So I recently read about MIT researchers. They came up with this 10 kg desalination equipment, and they're using seawater to turn that into drinkable water. What do you think about the scalability of this? And I also have kind of dumb question, whether you can chemically create water. I know theoretically it's possible, but what could be the implication of that so that we don't have to use just natural resources?
Yeah. You got me on the last one. I don't know. It's above my pay grade. The desal project, was that using the ocean's currents and the pressure? Was that the project? So yeah, I think what she's talking to is in desalination, which is taking seawater, making it fresh water. If you go down about 500 meters, 1,500 feet, you can use the pressure, the natural pressure, to basically, in a sustainable way, do desal.
Because desalination is an important technology, Middle East and other,
Exactly.
but it's highly energy intensive.
It's very energy intensive. So the energy to create that process, there's a lot of CO2 emission. And also the waste of the brine that comes off of that is bad for the environment. So a lot of that gets dumped out into the sea, and it doesn't do well for our food chain, if you will. And so there's some interesting technologies that are emerging around doing it in a more efficient way. I think it's probably not scalable globally, but it's certainly things you could do in communities like California or maybe off the coast of Dubai and areas that have water nearby. But we think that water reuse is probably the better way. It's taking a lot of people are investing in capturing rainwater. So we have these atmospheric rivers in California. All that water comes down on the surface and goes out into the ocean. And so how do we capture that water when we do have massive rain events and then use it and then treat it for drinking water? Right. So there's big projects that are going on right now in terms of capturing rainwater. And so I think that plus using wastewater and then using that for drinking water is another example that's going on in California. It's going on in Texas and some other states where they're basically taking wastewater and retreating that for drinking water.
It's interesting, just following up, I read in your sustainability report that the water industry is actually responsible for about 2% of global emissions, which is equivalent to the aircraft in airplanes.
Yep.
And what you're doing is actually helping reduce emissions for water, which is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of our goals is to help our utility partners be net zero.
Lauren, and do we have online questions too? Okay, why don't you do the online one next? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Florence. I'm in the Sustainability Management Program. I was curious what Xylem does to engage with communities and if there's any education component to the work you do.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll go back to just being in India. We, Claudia, myself, and a few other colleagues there in India, we were educating the students on basically sanitation and hygiene, on how to wash, literally showing them how to wash their hands. And so that's something we do in a lot of markets. I'm trying to think of other educational areas. I mean, that's a big one in terms of kind of the WASH initiatives in terms of sanitation and hygiene that we do all over the world. And like I said, we have 90% of our colleagues that are doing some kind of volunteerism, and these are areas that we focus on for sure.
Mike, you had an online question?
Yes. So Andrew Bird is an online MBA student and a participant in our Valoric Center for Entrepreneurship. Andrew's question is, could you share your insights on how individuals and institutions can make ethical investments in water technology companies?
Buy Xylem stock?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about it. I mean, there's a lot of, I guess it's called greenwashing that's out there. There's a lot of sustainability awards. There's a lot of pay for play, if you will. But at the end of the day, you just got to get under the hood of the company and understand truly what they're impacting across the different element, whether it's environmental, social, or governance and look at their actions. You know, your feet and your mouth have to move in the same direction. And so get under the hood and look at what they do, and I think you'll find the answer that you're looking for.
Actually, in the Kogod Sustainability Review, which is a student-run sustainability journal like the Harvard Business Review, this issue of greenwashing was the subject of the last edition. Like, how do you, everybody says we're sustainable, and a lot of it is BS.
Right.
How do you actually determine whether a company is doing the right thing?
Yeah.
So it's a big issue. Maybe one last question. Go ahead.
These are great questions, by the way.
Good questions, yeah.
Hi, I'm a second year environmental studies and poli-sci student, and I really enjoy CSR. So Milton Friedman, almost 55 years ago, wrote the social responsibility of its business is to increase its profits. With that being said, and Xylem being a very sustainable company, do you feel beholden not just to your shareholders, but also to the NGOs in DC and also the government?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the whole shareholder, stakeholder discussion. At the end of the day, if we don't meet our investor expectations, somebody else will. And somebody else might not run the company how we're running it, focused on this balance of creating economic and social value. And that's what we try to do both. We try to do equally social value creation and economic value creation. I think they can coexist in a company. I think we're living proof of that. And it's finding that right balance. And so that's how I think about it. And I think it's really important that you do both and do both well.
I want to see if there's a student willing to comment on an issue, which is how you've approached this issue in student groups for projects where someone's doing a great job, someone's slacking, someone sleeps through your meeting. How would you, like, just, do you want to answer that question, how you've handled it? And what worked and what didn't work? And were you the sleeper or the... Okay.
I would never name names, but no, I think that I am someone who I really try to organize my time well, because it does stress me out when there's a deadline coming and I don't feel prepared. So I know that my proactivity can sometimes be a detriment when other people have other things to do and they might not have the time early on. So what I have done is try and, first of all, communicate how we are going to approach the project. Everyone recognize what responsibility we have, so we're all on the same page in the beginning. Now, from time to time, throughout that process, people trickle out, and it's hard to navigate that. So I have tried to do my part, always recognize that I can take the initiative, be communicative with those who are maybe grading the assignment or maybe a teacher's assistant, without naming names, of course, just recognizing that I feel like I'm taking on a big weight for this project. Is there a way you can help me? Oftentimes they're very responsive. So I think that communicating early on that if you're having difficulty, not keeping that to yourself, knowing that you can take responsibility for your part. So sometimes you do have to go above and beyond. And at the end of the day, that will be a benefit to you. It will come back to you in a positive way, whether if you don't see it in the moment, I think that it will come back around. And then just also, like you said, communicating directly with that person, being confrontational, but in a way that is efficient and effective for that group. Also being empathetic and knowing that things arise and just trying to do your part and recognizing that there's only so much you can do.
Well said. I mean, that's culture. I was thinking of our high impact behaviors, Claudia, that we're striving for. Is we have a new CEO, we have a new CFO. We just did the largest transaction in our history. We're bringing 4,500 new colleagues into our company. And the behaviors matter, alignment matters. I think what you were describing is you had agreement. Maybe you get agreement up front with the team, but you're not aligned. And you have to get aligned as a team before you can go forward. And so we're spending a lot of time, Claudia, myself, and the leadership team, on having an aligned culture at Xylem and making sure that everybody understands the expectations of how we're going to show up and behave. And that starts with me as the leader and the leadership team. So there's a lot of analogies there in what you're going through.
Well, let me thank Victoria Harker for introducing us to Xylem, and thank the whole Xylem team for being here, and to Matthew, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and insights.
Thank you.
This has been
Happy
a
to do it.
wonderful
Yeah,
conversation.
great. Thank you.